we're going to start to talk about why we have made different rods, you know, different lengths, different casting weights. Bass fishing is incredibly varied. Look, this is typical bass fishing ground. Okay, the conditions aren't ideal, but it's lovely. It's shallow, it's reefy, it's sandy, it's bouldery. This is where I would use the 9 to 35 gram rods. I'd be fishing soft plastics, surface lures, bumping the smaller savage minnows. That rod gives me all the power, but also all the finesse that I need. But now imagine I go 2 miles that way and now it's raging onshore. I'm going to go surf fishing. I've got to punch the bigger surf seekers out. I want a more powerful rod, which is why we made those 12 to 46 gram rods. When you want to step up a gear, heavier rods, heavier conditions, heavier lures, that is when I go to the more powerful rods. I know we know these aren't bass fishing conditions, but let's imagine this was nighttime, okay? It's exactly this kind of ground, this shallow water, this kind of terrain. This is where the 9 to 35 gram rods, this is where they're perfect, because I've got all the power I need to deal with all the kind of lures I'd use on this ground, but I got so much feel and sensitivity. Doesn't matter if it's the 9 foot, the 9'6", you know, whichever you prefer, use the length you prefer. We deliberately worked these rods, all the 9 to 35 gram ones, to feel like they belong to each other. And look, you can push these rods. Of course you can, you know, it's 35 gram top end. You can go into the surf in sort of lightest, sort of medium surf conditions. You can push these rods hard, but they are so subtle. You imagine this is dark now. You're doing everything by feel. You know, it's pitch black, I can't see anything. I'm waiting for that kind of bang. That's where I want the lightest rod that I can get away with for the lures I'm using. There's no effort. I don't want to have to bust my shoulder every time I want to chuck a lure out. I'm using the pulse tail now, and all I'm going to do is wind it in. I'll stop, pick the line up. I need that rod, I need that 9 to 35 gram rod, whichever one it is, whichever one you prefer, I need it to sit in my hand like a wand. What I want from the 9 to 35 gram rods, doesn't matter if it's 9 foot or 9'6", I want that feeling of precision, okay? I want to put that lure, I always want to visualize that gully, visualize that rock I'm going to put it out to. I want that lure to feel like it's just there, bang, exactly where I want it, in behind a rock, in through a gully. This is the 9.6 SGS5, the 9 to 35 gram, and it still sits in my hand like a wand. You know, some people prefer the extra length, you know, extra distance they believe it gives them, extra control on their fish. I don't really care, I'll use both. But I wanted all the rods. You know, I didn't want to penalise someone for going for that 9.6 rod over the 9 foot. We still want to try and get as much feel and sensitivity, but also, let's be honest, you know, when you want to wind it up, you can whack it, but there's no strain. I've changed over to the 9 foot, 9 to 35 gram, the SGS8, but it's still that 9 to 35 gram range for this kind of fishing. What I'm actually doing now, I've gone for the 9 foot one because I really like that for bumping these small savage minnows around. See, the other rod just, I'm fishing it up, okay? So I do tend to like a shorter rod when I'm fishing with the tip up. All I'm doing is bumping it on the bottom, maintaining contact. I don't think there's any need to fish heavy, powerful rods when it's like this. Okay, and obviously there's some great bass conditions, but if I was out here at night, you know, I will back myself. Any size bass I might be lucky enough to hook, I will stop it dead on a 9 to 35 gram rod. It's all the power I need combined with all the precision I want. I want this 9 foot, both 9 foots, the SGS5 and the SGS8. The 9 foot needs to be, they need to be wands. You know those rods that just sit in your hand and they almost become part of your hand, part of your arm as you fish? Oh. I can feel everything. Every little bump that savage minnow is doing on the bottom, I can feel it. It's almost, I liken, look, the 9.6s, they're awesome. But I do, when I'm fishing that rod up, like I said, that 9 foot, they almost become like a sort of telephone in my hands. You know, they're transmitting everything. So you just put them out. Look at shallow ground here. I like these kind of rods for shallow ground. I can feel everything, just every little bump. And what I'd be waiting for if I was really bass fishing in sort of optimal conditions or night again, I'm waiting for that kind of boom, bang, 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 whack on. You know when you hit a rock, because it's that kind of hard sensation, but I want that jolt, that kind of fish jolt. Look, I'm always looking for structure, for features. The water itself is giving me signs. You're kind of reading the water like a book. And look at this. I mean, this is just, I want to work around those rocks. I've got my polarized sunglasses on. I can see there's rock here, rock there, there's gullies, there's sand. These fish are predators, they're hunters. This is so much where I like, no I don't like, I love that 9'2" SGS8 rod. I rated it 9 to 42 grams and it is still as effortless and as touchy-feely as those two 9 to 35 gram ones, but it's just giving me that bit more power in the tip I really like for bumping the heavier savage minnow around, for example. I wanted this rod to very deliberately sit between those 9 to 35 and then that 12 to 46. But I want it a little bit different. I still want that ease of casting. I mean, look, it's effortless. It's just turn him over. But now I'm going to let the lure hit the bottom. And of course you can do this with the lighter rods, there's no problem. It's just me being a fishing snob. I love that bit more power in the tip. And to be perfectly honest, I can do I could do 100%, but let's be a snob, I could do 95% of my bass fishing with this one rod, which is what I was really trying to get at. I can cast small surface lures. I can absolutely welter that 40 gram surf seeker, but it's that moving around, that kind of dancing around locations, conditions. I wanted to try and get that one rod to basically do everything. It's a stunner. Oh, oh. This estuary fishing, this is where I love the wands. And those wands to me are the two 9-foot rods. The SGS8 and the SGS5, they're both rated 9 to 35 grams. Now both rods, yeah, of course they will. They'll do plenty of your open coast fishing, but they are wands. They are lightning fast, but they don't rip your arms off. The tips are sensational. They're incredibly light, and I really like for this kind of precision sort of estuary work. You know, I've scaled down. I've got a pulse tail on. I've got a very light leader. And that rod just, it kind of weighs nothing. It's just, yeah, these 9-footers, they become an extension of your arm. And you just turn that lure over. Oh. And because it's windy, obviously, I've got my tip really low to the water. Try and take as much belly out of the line as possible. But that thing just sits in my hands. I do have a thing for 9-foot rods. Well, look, I've got a thing for all lure rods. I've got serious issues with fishing tackle. But I do love 9-foot rods, especially for my estuary fishing. They just, you know, 8'6", 9 foot, that they just feel like a really good length. You know, I can work my soft plastics. Obviously, they're a huge part of my fishing on rods like this. I have absolutely weltered the 35 gram surf seeker on these rods. It's no problem. But I also want to fish surface lures. You know, I want to bump paddle tails and stuff around, the minnows, that kind of thing. You know, I need a hugely versatile rod, but without being remotely overbearing. It's got to be easy. Just turn it into the wind like that. I can do that all day long. I've got a huge amount of sensitivity. It's very, very crisp. Both rods are incredibly light, but they will land any bass you're likely to hook. You know and I know, it depends where you hook your bass. There is something about that 9-foot length. It's just, I mean, I'm the 8'6" length. It's effortless. You get a good rod that turns over nicely and is lovely and fast, but isn't going to rip your shoulders off. That's the kind of 9-foot rod I like. Especially when it's windy. You know, any rod, you know, if you've got no wind whatsoever, you know, it's flat, calm, any rod's going to kind of pick it all up. But to me, the test is when the wind starts pumping. You know, like in golf, you know, when you're playing on a windy day, I'm actually going to tend to cast less, you know, cast more gently in the wind and try and get underneath it. I'm not forcing the rod, so I'm relying on the rod to do a lot more for me. You know, if I'm fishing with an outright poker, you know, I've got to really push that rod to bend it into the wind. You know, this is what I would call probably, you know, say, 75% power, because I can't fight the wind. But these rods do so much for me with so little effort. I am massively proud of all these SGS5 and SGS8 rods. I love them all for different reasons. And yes, I do love a really nice kind of wand-like rod, the 9-footers. But if you tied me down and you made me answer, Henry, what rods are you most proud of? I genuinely think it'd be the two 12 to 46 gram 9'6" rods. Look, my take on it is, okay, with your more powerful, your kind of next step up lure rods, anyone can make a rod to chuck a 50 gram metal, a 45 gram metal. But I really, really wanted to make sure that we had the power, you know, up to that 46 gram mark. I need and I want that kind of power, but in the same rod, I don't want to be handicapped if I then turn to one of my gravity sticks, you know, say the pulse tail, which I love so much. On the same rod, I want to fish as many kinds of lures, you know, accepting obviously it's a 12 to 46 gram rod. You know, I'm not going to turn to it for the kind of the most subtle of bass fishing, but I don't feel like I'm losing out towards that lower end, that kind of 14, 15, 16, 18 gram area. I've still got a huge amount of sensitivity. It casts the lures incredibly well, but then when I want to get kind of more, you know, pounding in the surf with the bigger metal lures, the big surface lures, you know, the bigger sand eels, the bigger minnows, I've still got that 46 gram top end, and it's not wrenching my shoulder off, but it hasn't got what I can't stand. It hasn't got one of those kind of flappy tips. You know, when the wind blows, I want that tip to go bang, and I don't want it flying around. These rods, honestly, I've never fished with more powerful lure rods that I like more than these two. What we have tried to do here is to show you some typical situations, types of locations where I would go and use these new lure rods. But in some respects, I'm going to ask you to almost ignore what I've just said, because you are most likely going to fish very different conditions, very different locations. But I would still encourage you, take these rods and do exactly what you're going to do with them. Look at those ratings, look at those lengths, and if that covers the kind of lures you are using, you know, we've made these rods to cover as many situations as possible. So please grab them and do exactly what you want to do with them.